Hello. As the government access provider for the towns of Duxbury, Kingston, Pembroke, and Plymouth, PAC TV has the responsibility and privilege of bringing local government into our residents' homes. Through meeting coverage, talk shows, informational programming, and forums, we work with our elected and appointed officials to ensure that you stay informed. Typically, we cover each town individually, but today we're doing something a little different. We have brought all of our town administrators and managers together to explore what goes into the management of each of our towns, their similarities, their differences, how our leaders collaborate, and some of the common issues facing them. In this conversation, I'm joined by Melissa Arrighi, Town Manager for the town of Plymouth, Bob Fennessy, Town Manager for the town of Kingston, Rainey Reed, Town Manager for the town of Duxbury, and Ed Thorne, Town Administrator for the town of Pembroke. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Excellent. So for our roundtable, since typically residents are only seeing the government programming that's happening in their towns unless we're doing something that's statewide, they may not know what's happening with government in each of their sister cities or local towns. So I'd like to start by going around the table. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, talking a little bit about your town and what brought you into local government. And Melissa, I'd like to start with you from the town of Plymouth.
So I've been the town manager in Plymouth, been working there since late 2003, and I've been the town manager now for about 8 years. I did a couple years as acting when we were without one. It's an exciting community. It's very large. We've said that on the show quite a few times. It's 104 square miles, 400 miles of road. We have about a $220 million budget. We have some challenges here, including the nuclear power plant. We also operate a municipal airport, and we have about 60,000 people. So the demand for services is very varied as our senior population grows, and I think that we've been able to respond through that through some of the new public facilities that you see in Plymouth, which is the new senior center, a couple years old now. We have 2 new high schools, and we're currently building a new town hall, and that's a challenge all of its own.
And that's going to be opening, we're looking at October of this year, correct?
October 31st is the plan right now. I'm still hoping that will happen. We're running into some late hiccups, but I think we'll work them out.
And it's going to be right in, for those folks who aren't from Plymouth, it's right in the downtown area, and it's the old 1820 courthouse has been completely refurbished, correct?
It has. It's 26 Court Street. It's in that beautiful old 1820 building that will house meeting rooms as well as our town clerk's office. And then there is a glass connector lobby leading to a 60,000 square foot addition that is just phenomenal.
Now, what brought you into town government?
I was working at Bridgewater State College at the time, and I was involved in human resources. I ran the student employment office. We had about 1,300 kids that worked on campus. So I had a strong HR background. I started working, volunteering on local boards and committees in town, became close to what is the president of the college, was the president of the college, Dana Molifaria. He was the vice president at the time, and he wanted to improve town-gown relations, and I got really involved with that. As my interest grew, I decided to get my master's in public administration and ended up down the Cape in Orleans and then now in Plymouth.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today. Rainey, I'd like to turn it to you. Tell us a little bit about Duxbury and what brought you to Duxbury.
Duxbury is a coastal community here in Plymouth County, roughly 15,000 people, $75 million budget on average. Right now we're at about $72 million. 36 square miles. It's a beautiful community. I've been there 4.5 years. Prior to being in Duxbury, I was in Hanson. Prior to that, I was in Mashpee and then Harwich. So I've worked up and down the South Shore and out on the Cape. It's a lovely community. It's mostly residential. In fact, 97% of it is residential. That means our tax base is basically based on residential taxpayers. It's a great community. The people that we have, one of our greatest assets in Duxbury are the volunteers. We have a very diverse group of volunteers who come from all walks of life with varying backgrounds that bring a tremendous amount to any of the organizations they serve, ranging all the way from the Board of Selectmen to the Planning Board, to the Finance Committee, Fiscal Advisory. It's just a great place. Like I said, I've been there 4.5 years. I started in municipal government about 23 years ago working in the state of Vermont. I worked in a small town called Richmond, Vermont, just outside of Burlington, where I was the assistant town administrator, and I started there right out of college.
What attracted you to that field and that industry?
Public service, actually. Prior to that, I was a motorcade driver in Michael Dukakis' presidential motorcade in 1988. And at the conclusion of his campaign, which as we all know was unsuccessful, he had instilled in many of the people who were working for him an ethic that said, public service is a noble profession, and I bought into that, and I believed it, and it really is. My mom was a school teacher, so she was essentially a public servant as well. and it sort of runs in the family, if you will. So I thought, what a great opportunity, and I saw the ad in the paper, and I applied, and I got the job, and 20-something years later, here I am.
So you must love it.
I do. In fact, I had known both of my predecessors in Duxbury, Richard McDonald and before him Rocco Longo, for a number of years, and I had talked to Richard over the years about, you know, what would it take to become the town manager in Duxbury, and he said, well, you're going to have to apply, and I did. It was a strong field of candidates, and it was a job I'd actually dreamed about having for about 10 years before I got it. So I've sort of landed in my dream job, and knock on wood, I'll be there a long time. So I've always wanted to be the town manager in Duxbury, and by gosh, I got it.
And it sounds like from the way you just described the town and the fact that it is so volunteer-based, that it's the whole concept of giving back to the community, that it's a perfect fit for you. That
Absolutely,
that's the
absolutely.
tone in your town.
And it's not just, in some communities I've worked, you find that a lot of the volunteers are of retirement age because they have more time. But in Duxbury I found that there's a great cross-section. It starts at about age 30 and goes on up to the people in their 80s, and it's remarkable. You have people volunteering not just on town committees and boards, but you have them volunteering at the sports levels with all the kids programs and things like that. So it's really neat to see how it spans generations.
I think we're lucky in all the communities that sit here at the table that we have so many active and engaged residents. You know, whether folks are working
Definitely.
in our communities or working outside of the communities, that they're involved either in town government, they're involved in the school systems for their children, they're doing volunteer work, they're having a say in what's happening in the towns, and for the most part invested. I think we're very lucky in this region.
Without question.
Thank you so much. Bob, would you like to tell us a little bit about your town? Tell us a little bit about Kingston, our neighbor.
I represent the great town of Kingston. We, like these two, coastal community, about 13,000 people, a $46 million budget. Kingston takes pride in being one of the charter green communities in the Commonwealth. It's something that is in focus on everything we do. We're looking now at building a new library. We received a library grant for about $7 million. We're also looking at replacing our police station. So there's a lot of building going on. There's a lot of community interest, and there's also a lot of concern about taxation and so forth. So we're trying to balance all that with what the resources that we have, and seeking outside money like grants that can help take the edge off those things.
And when you're talking about being one of the first green communities in the state, I remember when you were awarded that, but your townhouse, which is not new any longer, but it seems like it was just built.
It does.
As well as the senior center, were both really noted because of all of the work that was put into them to ensure that they were green.
Yes. The townhouse is 13 years old now. And
oh my gosh, that makes me very old.
The Council on Aging is 6 years old, and that, you know, and again, they're considered new buildings and very high energy efficiency. So from my perspective, how did I get here? I was once the town administrator for the town of Boylston, which is part of Worcester County. And after that, I practiced law for 12 years and also taught municipal law at the UMass Law School. So it kind of drew together with my history of being a selectman in my own town of Plainville for 18 years, long time to be a selectman. And that's over probably a 25-year period, but that kind of drew me back to coming back to municipal government after practicing law. It's something that I really enjoy, helping people and getting involved in you know, in the real hands-on work of municipal government.
So you never really left it, even when you were practicing law. You were serving your local town.
Correct,
in Plainville,
yeah.
as a selectman for years. Yeah. You just chose to go back into the career full-time.
That's true, yes.
How are you enjoying your time in Kingston?
I enjoy it immensely. Kingston's been a really great fit for me, and I think that I am for the town too. So it's been fun. It's a
Excellent.
4.5-year ride now. So
You're just getting started.
just getting started. We'll see.
Ed, talk to us a little bit about Pembroke and your experiences there so far.
Well, I'm the first and only town administrator. The position was created in the spring of '98. I was hired in the fall of '98, and I've been there since. So we're going on 18 plus years. I've been, as Bob said, a great fit for me to be in Pembroke. Pembroke is one of those communities that grew incredibly in the last 20 years. We're now at about the 20,000 mark population-wise. Our budget is probably $67 million, and one of the the great things that happened in our community was the great breakup of the Silver Lake district when Pembroke left Silver Lake and left Plimpton, Halifax, and Kingston, and then we formed our own district. And I was there as their town administrator when that occurred. In fact, the great story I have is that when we were trying to close the deal at Steve Trifletti's office, who's the town moderator in Plymouth,
Yes.
We were there to close the deal on buying the property, which is now the Pembroke Middle School and the Pembroke High School. And at the time, I had a check for $13.5 million to buy the property. And at the time, the deal fell through. So I had to take the check for $13.5 million and go home. And so,
Good for you, Ed.
And then you came back.
and I came back. And so anyway, and there was a great story about John Tuffy, who was a selectman at the time and was the business manager for Silver Lake, turned out to be the superintendent. And he had a great story about me skipping to Brazil with the money.
With the $13 million check.
With the $13 million.
No.
So, but it's been great. You know, the challenges that we face as a growing community is providing the services and keeping the taxes at a reasonable level. The major projects we got coming on, we're looking at a new police station, a new fire station, a new recreation center in the center of town, as well as the Public Works Commissioners, have a $10 million article to renovate their Public Works garage on Mattakesa Street. So we have all these things that we need to do, and I feel very fortunate to help the town get through the growing pains that they've had the last 5 to 10 years. So
now, do you feel you have grown with the town? Is it from 18 years? Things have changed so dramatically in the town. What is it that keeps you coming back every day?
Well, when I first got there in the fall of '98, I had a meeting with all the department heads, and I told them, I said, I don't want you to think I fell off a turnip truck, because I've been in the business for a long time. I got my start in North Carolina after I went to grad school and got my master's. I originally, taught in a classroom down in Hampton, Virginia, and I was teaching government, and I thought maybe that I would try to expand my horizons. So I went back to my alma mater, East Carolina, and got my master's. And originally, I went into the urban planning program, and I thought that was the way I was going to go. And then I found out that city managers hire planners, and so then that's when I decided to get my MPA. And he got into the management business, and I started out as an assistant in North Carolina and worked my way into West Virginia. Actually, I was in Massachusetts, in Leicester and Westboro in the late 80s, and then I went back to West Virginia to be city manager of Fairmont for about 10 years.
But you enjoyed the winter, so you came back.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And snow budgets.
A name that was already dropped before, Rocco Longo. I knew Rocco from West Virginia in the early 80s, and he was then the town manager in Duxbury, and he sent me a copy of the Beacon, which is the Mass Municipal Association newsletter, and Pembroke had just created the job and was advertising for the first time, and he sent me a copy of that page and said, Pembroke's looking. I went, oh man, I don't think I want to come back up to Massachusetts, but I love the South Shore, and I just really fell in love with it, and like I said, Pembroke and I have been a great fit.
And it's really enjoyable to hear a little bit about each of you personally, as well as talking about the towns. Where we sit right now at the PAC TV studios, we are in Plymouth, but within 15 minutes I can be to each of our 4 communities, each of our 4 towns, and it's really interesting when you think about them. We're all so close together. There are a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. I'm sure the 4 of you interact often, and you're dealing with very different issues on a day-to-day basis. I'd just like to throw it out there. Where are some of the ways that you find that even, land-wise, we're so different? How are our 4 towns similar? How are they different? What are the things that strike you individually?
Well, I don't know. I think we've all talked at different times. All 3 of these gentlemen have been a great resource to me since I came to Plymouth. And even now, as I hear them talk a little bit about what I didn't know about each of you, is it's interesting to know how much building all of us have going on for public facilities. Because I don't think that is as popular in other areas. So if I can ask a question, do any of you have a full-time facilities manager? I find one of the areas that we lack on is taking care of our public buildings. We have 36 of them and nobody concentrating on it full-time.
We do.
We do too. We have a full-time. We started with a part-time 19-hour position, built it up over the past year and a half to a full-time position.
Has it made a huge difference in how your buildings are maintained?
Immensely.
I can attest to that as well. I didn't mention our public building because we've already done it all. To the tune of $128 million school. We have a new high school, middle school. We did a crematory. We did a new crematory. We did a renovation, brand new police department, and we did a renovation of the fire department, all in the span of a year. So we spent a lot of money right out of the gate. The first person I hired when I got there, who was already sort of hand-delivered to me, the superintendent and I hired a facilities manager who's a full-time employee. And with 78 buildings, it makes all the difference in the world. It's interesting when you speak to him because he never really looks you in the eye because he's always looking around the building to see if anything needs to be fixed. He's a fascinating guy.
Shared between town and school?
Yes, shared between town and school.
No, ours is standalone for the town.
Okay.
School has just hired a facilities.
What we did was migrate and blend everybody under his roof. So all custodial staff comes under him. Lands and Natural Resources is still under the DPW, but he has a say in mowing and maintenance. It's a huge, huge plus. We saved probably $50,000 within 6 months of him being there because we were able to eliminate a number of contracts we had. The second thing we did was he hired a HVAC specialist, so we were able to knock out all those contracts.
Right.
So we have our own HVAC guy to take care of everything. I mean, when you think of what these physical plants require in terms of maintenance for air conditioning and air handling, that's huge.
And how
So
is
are you
Plymouth
saying you
handling it right
don't
now?
have that?
So with all our buildings and how much money we have invested, we do not have one person that concentrates exclusively. So our assistant DPW director, who's also trying to help with all these projects, and we have a very strong union environment, so he's dealing with that, tries to get to projects when he can. It's been really
So do you
terrible.
put it also on the department heads of each department that has
So
a
our
building
library
under their
director,
control?
who should be concentrating on library services,
exactly.
spends an exorbitant amount of time working on her building, as does, I think, in many ways, the police department. And then, of course, we have 7 fire stations. So they call every day over to the assistant DPW director. So I'm glad to hear. Does Pembroke have it too?
We originally shared a facilities manager, and then we ended up with the person full-time, and then that person left to take a position in another community, and since then we've been kind of hit and missing it. Now that we've kind of consolidated our custodial situation to all of the town buildings, I'm thinking that by next spring we're going to probably have to create that, especially with the facilities that we got proposed for next spring. Next town meeting is going to be, quite the sideshow with all these buildings coming in. So I'm thinking that we're definitely going to lean in that direction next spring.
And I was faced with exactly the same problem you were, where I had a library director who was trying to pick out which kind of roof we should put on the library,
Right.
which is not under the library director's purview. I mean, she shouldn't have to do that. And we sent our facilities manager right to her right out of the gate and took care of that within a year. It was
Interesting.
So
awesome.
based on what you're saying, it seems to make sense that when it
Tremendous.
comes to cost effectiveness, it's best to have somebody who's focused just on the buildings and maintenance, and
You bet.
and every other department being able to focus on their particular job.
Well, I'll quote you all
change
at town
that.
And
meeting.
then one of, the
That's
things,
right.
one of the things we also had him do was he did a 10-year forecast as to what it was going to cost, and we told him, here's the amount of money you can have. So now he earmarks $350,000 a year just for building maintenance right out of the gate with our capital projects. So we don't have to worry about individual departments fighting to try and get this project versus
That's
that.
what we do.
He does it all. He's sort of the great leveler, and it works perfectly.
And if you get a Green Communities grant, you got to have somebody
He manages
that's
that.
involved in that.
You
And
bet.
we've got 2 in a row, and we've been kind of fortunately been able to get the projects underway and fulfilled. But sometimes it was like the library director telling the contractor, well, I think I like that light, and maybe I don't, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
and then, if you
How
get a
to
grant from the
consolidate and
state, you got to
manage.
do that. Absolutely.
And that actually brings up another several wonderful questions and topics. Finances. You deal with finances every single day, whether it be with employees, whether it be with health insurance, your buildings, projects that are moving forward. What are some of the challenges you find, or how much are you able to work with finding grants or state or federal funding to help to support the work that you're doing, not just to maintain everything we have in our communities, but also, as you say, there are so many projects coming up in different towns, except Duxbury. Sounds like you've got everything everything's fresh
all
and
new
new right
buildings.
now.
We're not going to need a school for a while.
Yeah. But what are some of the successes and challenges that you find in dealing with that?
It's always a challenge, the finances. Since I've been there, and it's going into the 5th year now, it's been a level services budget that has been given to the town. So we maintain the level services. We look for areas where we can actually cut down on the finances. And we have all the department heads that are able to look for grant money. It's great to get state and federal money put into the town, especially when you're presenting something at town meeting. For instance, we have a beach, a Gray's Beach, small beach, unlike Duxbury's, but very nice. But we want to renovate that beach and build it into a living shoreline. That was a new concept, and we went out looking for grants, and we were able to take an $880,000 project, and ultimately it'll cost the town about $13,000.
Kidding.
The rest is grant money from state and federal.
That's amazing.
So and we'll have a new beach and a new beach not restaurant. You know, those little snack shacks and bathrooms and parking and so forth. So that's that's one way that we look at trying to take the edge off the taxpayers, and it seems to be working. I mean, we have some great department heads that seek out these grants.
We've had some success with grants, some departments much more than the other. I think what South Shore town managers will get together every so often and have lunch, and I think that I've isolated each of these people at one time or the other and said, where I'm worried for the town in our future is our health insurance line item. In addition, some of the concerns I have about pension. Our retirement board does a fantastic job, but we have one disability retirement after the other, and it's grown so much, even in the last 5 years, that it's really scary when you start to thinking about, a 30-year-old employee that goes out on disability retirement for the rest of their life. And all of that is on your pension system, and all of that is on your health insurance. So I think I've at different times just said there has to be a solution here somewhere, but it's such a sensitive subject, nobody really wants to talk about it, and you have to do it publicly, and I think that makes both employees and retirees feel both nervous and anxious, and that you're against them, and you're not. It's just for the town of Plymouth, the health insurance alone is a $40 million line item.
So you're trying to negotiate and figure how best to service everybody because in such a large
and
town.
Melissa made a great point about a common issue, and health insurance is a major concern for all of us, and it's a common thread now. Duxbury and Plymouth are self-insured, have their own programs. Bob and I are in the Mayflower Health Group, but it's still, whether you're dealing with unions or individuals on a disability claim or whatever, it is a major, major concern that we have right now.
So for all 4 towns, do you find that it's the majority of your budget? Or is it?
It's a significant
and
growing.
10 to 12% probably.
Schools are the majority of the budget.
Salaries.
In all the towns.
Yeah.
And that actually, and this is jumping a little bit, but when we talk about education, I think our 4 communities are really known for the quality and level of education that are offered to residents, and people very often move to these communities based on the school systems.
I think going away, creating our own school district really gave the town a sense of identity, because now it's a Pembroke Titans, it's the Pembroke this, it's, and it just,
make a difference.
and it really, really did, Melissa. I mean, it really did. I mean, I saw it when there were people that said, well, my kids went to Silver Lake and I went to Silver Lake, and why should we leave and all that? And we'll have no control, we're going to have more control. Well, we do. I mean, instead of writing that assessment check, we can negotiate and talk with the superintendent and the school committee about issues and go from there, and present a consensus at the Springtown meeting and get the budget adopted as opposed to writing a check.
Well, we liked those checks.
Yeah, right. Are you having all the challenges of the charter schools, though, interfering with some of you? Not interfering, that wasn't fair, but affecting your public funding for the school system?
I haven't seen that yet from our perspective, and maybe again because we're in the regional school system at the junior and high school level.
Intermediate and high, yep.
So.
Yeah, our charter school system went through the roof. this past year.
One of the challenges I know Pembroke also has is just when you look at state funding for individual students, so the reimbursement you get per student, you aren't quite funded where some of the surrounding schools would be, you know, to the same level, and that's been a challenge. But residents have really supported.
Well, Donna, if you can figure out that Chapter 74,
We'll change this whole focus, and you can teach a lesson.
Exactly.
I've learned everything I know at town meetings and government meetings.
that Chapter 70 formula is, you might as well be able to fly to the moon, you know.
Yeah.
One of the huge successes, I think, particularly in Pembroke, has been your performing arts program. You've done an amazing job with that.
Yeah.
There's
Personally, or
and each community, and whether it be Kingston individually or Kingston within Silver Lake, I think you all have such interesting personalities within the schools and what you offer your students as well as your employees. So it definitely speaks a lot to, you know, town management, speaks a lot to the educational system and the folks within the towns who are committed to it.
Oh, in Duxbury, it's huge. I think it's either 90 or 95% of our students all play an instrument by the time they leave. So it's remarkable. So not just in that respect, but they all play all kinds of sports. They're really well ranked among their state colleagues. The school itself is highly ranked as well. The voters in Duxbury truly believe in education. I mean, they have for a long, long time, thus the $128 million school project. But not only that, they've believed in it a long time before that. So it's something the community has invested in heavily. It is one of the major draws for our community. You don't go there to work, you go there to live and to play. You know?
An interesting story about when we were leaving Silver Lake was that somebody mentioned that, oh, but there's only one Pembroke kid on the basketball team. Well, next year there'll be 15 Pembroke kids playing basketball.
Right.
So the involvement is so much greater, you know, from a community. And I remember a story from years ago about, they said the best learning environment for high school students is to be in a high school between 1,000 and 1,500 students. Anything bigger than that, then students get disenfranchised. And they don't feel like they're part of the school because it's too big. And in our case, it got more people involved in the community when we had our own system.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is a really fascinating conversation. I know it's been really comfortable because it's flowing from topic to topic. We're going to take a brief break, however, and we'll be right back with Roundtable with our municipal leaders. Thank you for joining us.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But you probably won't. You're busy. Kids, work, show coming back in 48 seconds. So let's do this now. Hold up one finger if you're a man, women, 0. 3 more fingers if you're over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40. If you're not sure, keep in mind you're sitting on a couch right now, so 1 more finger if you're not very active. 1 finger if yes, 0 if no. 1 yes, 0 no. Next, find the body type that looks most like you and hold up that many fingers while I look around awkwardly. And that's it. If you're holding up 5 fingers or more, you probably have prediabetes. Sorry to be so blunt, but hey, you're busy. Just go to the site.
Welcome back to Roundtable. I'm your host, Donna Rodriguez. Today I am joined by the town administrators and town managers from the towns of Duxbury, Kingston, Pembroke, and Plymouth. When we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about the school systems, and now as we come back, I'd like to throw our next topic on the table is to talk a little bit about, because in each of your positions, you are unique within your town, and you may not have other folks who are doing similar jobs. How do you use one another as resources? How do you find networks to be able to have folks that you can talk with when dealing with issues within your towns or for support systems?
Well, I can certainly add that we look to Ed quite a bit. I don't even know if you started this or you started it with Rocco, but there's a town managers group, and I think you said earlier there's about 25 of us that do a couple things. We get together quarterly for lunch, but we end up talking shop the whole time, or most of the time. It's what we have in common. It's an opportunity to ask those very questions of, are you having the same challenge in your community? We have a listserv of all of us that we can go out to immediately and get feedback on if we need something like a policy in place, or if you're having an issue about a salary and you want to know what they make in other communities. So, and that way we're able to quickly bounce ideas off each other. And I said earlier, for me, it's worked really well.
And that email thread is huge because I have an unwritten rule rule that when anything comes in on that thread from any one of these three people or the other folks that are on there, I try to get to it right away because they're always very good about responding to me right away. So if we have an oddball question that we know that somebody out there has answered, we make sure that we all get back to each other very quickly because typically the response is usually within a matter of hours, and we've got the issue wrapped up. It's kind of nice.
It's nice, but it kind of clogs up your email server too. When you
Yes.
start going through them,
Yeah.
and you know, but it is. I agree. I think from my perspective, coming here to the South Shore for the first time and getting to meet everybody through that quarterly meeting that we have, it was great because you build those relationships. And now I know I can call you, I can call you. We've had communications and letters where we signed on behalf of each other, and same with Ed. Ed actually drove me here today. So
Very nice of it.
so it's a great way to bond.
Yeah, it's called the South Shore Managers Association, and it kind of started when I first got here. The first couple of years I was here, as a result of a joint purchase agreement that we did with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council about some joint purchasing. It was for like concrete and whatever, you know, public works kind of things, and so there was a group of us that, you know, formed in that regard, and over the years, it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And then we've had administrators and managers that aren't literally on the South Shore that want to be part of it. You know, we got the gentleman from Carver and the town administrator from Norton, you know, joins us. So, you know, it's a testament to the participation that, you know, all of us enjoy, that the organization has thrived the way it has.
And you're creating not just resources, but you're supporting one another because you do all have, you know, even though your towns may be different and some of the individual issues you're dealing with in your towns are different, you're speaking to somebody who it's almost in shorthand that you understand what each other faces on a day-to-day basis and can support each other in your roles and as resources.
That's a good way to put it. We're fluent in each other's vocabulary. So when we come to the table, we already know what the problem is. And we typically have a solution. There's an old saying that I learned a long time ago: no one is as smart as all of us. And by gosh, when you put us all together, one of us comes up with the answer somewhere.
Now, tell me, what are some of the ways that you've found that you've worked together? Are there projects or are there situations such as an emergency management that you find that there are more opportunities that you're coming together to, you know, across town lines?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we can talk about dispatch.
Yep. Go ahead. You want me to talk about it, or would you like?
Well, you know what? I think that you have taken such a lead role in this. I know that our police chief and fire chief have both spoken really highly about the fact that you partnered with your fire chief and are willing to host this, and it's going to mean a lot for us.
About 5 or 6 years ago, my predecessor, Richard McDonald, was the town manager in Duxbury, and he had a conversation with the police chief and the fire chief at the time. Actually, Matt Clancy, the police chief, and the fire chief, Kevin Nord, who was sort of the lead proponent of this concept of a regional dispatch facility. The state, through its funding that it receives through people's cell phones, we all pay $1 on an annual basis as a result of legislation that was passed for this thing called an MSPA, which is a primary access point for dispatching. The funding comes from the state to create regional dispatches. The state no longer wants to fund standalone dispatching centers. So what they said is, if you create a primary dispatching center, we will pay for it. So Kevin Nord, in his vision, said, let's see if we can do something with this. So what we did was create a center at our existing fire department, where we now host 3 towns, and we're looking to pick up at least 2 or 3 more, one of which is Plymouth, the other may be Kingston. Pembroke certainly invited to the party as well.
We're certainly
because we know that the funding source will be there for the regional facilities, because the state's no longer interested in paying for standalone facilities. So this is something that we've been looking at for a long time, and it's working really, really well. We're getting ready to expand our existing facility in terms of increasing the footprint of the building as well. So we're going to have, in addition to the fire station, that'll work really well to serve everybody. It's sort of the way to go now. They're not looking, like I said, at standalone facilities anymore.
Rennie and Melissa, do you hear from the opponents of such a system that, well, the dispatcher doesn't know as much about Plymouth or Duxbury or Plimpton, you know, because we're not doing it locally? So,
Well,
I mean, are you hearing that?
We have heard that, so what we did was hire them. If they're good enough to meet the standard that we're looking for, then we'll keep them. And we've done that in many, many occasions where we've simply matriculated the existing dispatchers from those communities into our workforce, and it's worked out really well. The other thing is they not only know that community from which they came, but they also know the host community and all the others, so that you get a much better product. And the dispatcher training that they go through is extensive. It is.
So it's not like they take their own town's calls.
No, they do not. They will be they take calls from all communities.
Yeah.
We had a recent case a month ago where a dispatcher was able to save the life of a 10-week or 10-day-old baby just by keeping the mother calm and providing the instruction over the phone while the asset in, I believe it was Halifax, arrived at their house and was able to take things over. But that's how good the dispatchers are, that they can work through that problem right over the phone. That's not the case with all of them, you know. But neither was it a miracle. It was because of the excellent training that they receive and helping the parent deal with the crisis that they were faced with.
So by consolidating, you're able to then offer or invest in more extensive training, perhaps,
You
to
bet.
be able to increase the
These
level
people
of
that
quality.
operate as dispatchers are operating at the highest level. And like I said, it is an incredibly challenging position. They work as shift employees. They receive extensive training, the majority of which is paid for by the state. So it's terrific.
No, I would imagine maybe that people initially, if you're saying that some people are concerned, I want a dispatcher in my town, but most of the time when we call 911, as somebody calling in, I've never thought to ask,
Where are you?
where are you? Just, I'm calling 911 and I need help.
Because when you're calling 911, it doesn't matter where you're calling. Nobody cares. What they care about is who's going to show up here right now. Because in the fire service is an old saying that when they show up, it's the worst day of your life. But it can also be the best day of your life, especially if the outcome is positive. You can dispatch from just about anywhere as long as you have the facilities and the team to send out. So it works really, really well.
What are some of the other ways that you're finding that you might be working together? I know you were making references, it being summertime and being along the shoreline. We in New England now know that we've got a lot of issues with some larger creatures in the waters who are visiting us, and we know that Duxbury is actually a nursery for smaller sharks. And so, what are some of the ways that you work together to think about our tourists, our summer visitors, our residents?
Well, certainly we had an issue with a shark. I think that was actually 2 summers ago, and we were on the phone within a matter of hours because we wanted to make sure that we sent out the same press release. The information that goes out to the public is critical, and you want to have a unified message so that there's already so much misinformation that can get out there, and we talked about this on the break with Facebook and local Facebook pages in your community, and they can be full of rumors or innuendos, and many times we're chasing things that we really shouldn't be spending our time on. So when we collaborate like that about a common issue, we make sure that message is correct.
So you're getting good information to the public quickly and helping to decrease any misinformation or fear.
Right, and it doesn't just stop at our level. It just so happens that our harbor masters are friendly as well. I mean, there's a whole harbor master association that meets the way we do on a very collegial basis, and so they were in constant contact with one another too. So if we saw it somewhere, then Melissa and her crew were going out in the water to look at it too, to make sure we could verify. So yeah, we do that kind of collaboration all the time.
Maybe not Melissa.
So you weren't out there looking for the great
I
white?
was. I went right out there. I couldn't wait. It was exciting, you know.
And he also set up a concession stand.
And Ed was my first customer. It was remarkable.
That's a good way to, develop income, further income for the town.
It isn't just waterborne issues also. I mean, there are road issues that Ed and I deal with, and Ed can probably talk about that.
Yeah, we have a truck exclusion project going on where it turns out that Pembroke is kind of like not an end destination that you would have at a Duxbury, where you got to be going there to get there. And we're finding out that we have a lot of truck traffic going through Pembroke, going from one state route to another. And a couple of these roads originate in Duxbury, and we already had one dealt with the High Street and Mountain Avenue, and that turned out to be very successful. And so if a road that we want to ban trucks from, and it starts in another community, then we'll talk to Rennie and the Board of Selectmen over there and try to get their support, and then we put the package together for Mass DOT and go from there. But we would need the support of the town of Duxbury in order to pull this off.
And similarly, we're working on the exit 10 on Route 3, collaborating to make changes to that whole exit. with the town of Duxbury and Kingston.
Yeah, because people going on to exit 10 or coming off of exit 10 are going to one of two places immediately. They're either going to Duxbury or they're going to go to Kingston.
Literally,
right?
depending on what side of the highway you're turning.
Exactly,
yes.
whether you make a right or a left. So the signalization project would impact both of our communities. So it's something that not just Bob and I work on, but our town planners work on at their level as well. Then we can all make a similar application to the state and see how things go from there.
Excellent. Now, you referred to communication a few moments ago when talking about some of your collaborations, and we were talking about it on the break as well. Communication must be clearly a huge piece of what you deal with every day. How do you help to facilitate getting information out to your residents in your towns? Because every town has a little bit of a different personality in that respect as well. You know, we have a lot of the, I guess, grassroots conversations going on social media, but as town officials, how do you work either through social media, through your website, through direct phone lines to be able to communicate what's happening?
Every one of us is going to say all of the above.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, and I think from...
And have you seen changes, you know, recently in the way you approach it?
Yeah, from our perspective, we unfortunately we don't rely, but unfortunately there's these other Facebook pages that seem to take up the cause and put information out there, and oftentimes, like Melissa said, it's not true, but it builds on itself. We don't have a town website. Our clerk's office has a small website we have a town website. We don't have a Facebook presence yet. We're looking at doing that so that we can put out the information, the true information that comes out before it builds up these rumors and innuendo, as you say, and try and nip things in the bud. Because half the time when like you said again, when you're chasing these things, these rumors or these issues that build up on a Facebook page, when you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of effort and there's a lot of things being said where it's unnecessary, if we can first get it out to them. So that's something we're working on. You probably already have Facebook
We've done
pages.
that. We've done the Facebook page, and we have a Twitter account, and everything really has to filter through the town manager's office, although we have allowed some other departments to get some Twitter accounts.
Like police department or
Yes,
school department
slowly
or...
we have been able to do that. You want to be careful, though, because you want to make sure it's linked to yours so that people know there is still one main avenue for the information. Now, what concerns me is when you do have a popular Facebook page that has inaccurate information out there, no public servant should spend their weekends or their nights, or 3 o'clock in the morning when people are putting things on there, chasing information that is inaccurate, because you will spend all your time glued to that, and you won't get the more important things done that need to be done in the town. However, in saying that, communication does seem to all be moving in that direction. So between Facebook, Twitter, updating our website, using the Sheriff's Department for the reverse 911 calls that's available to us, certainly using the advantages we have here. PAC TV has only become larger and larger, so I think being able to do public service announcements, using you for snow events, I mean, all of that to me has become a real advantage.
Excellent. Do you find, depending on the ages, perhaps, of your populations, that you know, have you seen the shift as your population is older? Do you have more folks that they want to see it in the newspaper?
Yep.
They want that reverse 911. And other communities might not look at anything unless it's online.
Yeah, Duxbury's had its own reverse 911 system for many years, and we use it all the time. And we can specifically target different geographical areas. You know, if there's paving on this road some week, or if there's a road closure over here, we can hit that neighborhood if we have to. In terms of social media, you know, the fire department, police department, recreation department all use Twitter accounts. We have I'd say a fledgling Facebook presence with respect to our recreation department. The school department's using Facebook more. From the town management side, no, I refuse to. There's no way I'm going to get into an argument on the internet, because we all know who wins on those. No one. There are those folks, though, that do have those splinter pages that are interested in, you know, talking about things. Some of them are helpful. In some cases, it's a good barometer to see what the public may be thinking, but you have to remember, you have to keep in mind that public. Who is it? Are they all Duxbury residents? They may not be. They could have aliases. You can get a sense for a small percentage of the community. but it doesn't speak for the majority. That's quite clear. We do use email extensively. We use the town's website extensively, and we have a tremendous amount of subscribers, both in town and out of town. So anytime there's an update to the website, they're getting it, and so they know what's happening.
And you do have a great system. I used to be a Duxbury resident before becoming a Plymouth resident, and just being able to get. I am happy with all 4 of our towns.
But you can sign up for that, and we push the message out as quickly as
And I still do receive them, and it really it's great. And Pembroke has a great community system as well, for
we
emails.
Appreciate that, and I think what really prompted all of us to get involved in it were emergencies. You know, I think Nemo was a great example of something that really focused. You know, all of us had, you know, conferences at the end of the storm and said, all right, what can we do better? I mean, we found out that what we thought was a great emergency shelter for a storm like that wasn't, you know, and that we found out that the center of town gets electricity on before the rest of the town. And our emergency shelter was at a school located in the south central part of town. And we found out that the library was the best one for an emergency shelter. And, you know, things like that caused us, you know, emergencies like that caused, you know, our folks to examine what we were doing and how we could get the word out. And of course, you know, things like, you know, the power outages and things like that where, you know, National Grid or Eversource tells you, you know, call this number. Well, call the number because that allows them to target what areas of your community are down. Yeah.
And by monitoring not just, you know, the outbound message coming from town hall to the residents, but monitoring the inbound conversation too, which can happen sometimes on pages like Duxbury Helping Duxbury is a perfect example. If there's an outage in town, people will start noting that. If you've lost power, you may still have the ability to access information by way of your phone if it's battery operated, as long as the cell tower system is still running. So that's one way that you can get the information, and you can still see what's happening, and then you can forward that information onto your emergency personnel and typically address the situation pretty quickly.
And when you were talking about the Nemo storm in particular, that was the one storm I started referring to it as a resident as the Facebook storm.
Yep, exactly.
Because my husband and I were able to see our phones, we were able to get to social media, and that's really where we got information from all of our towns, what was happening from our state representatives and senators, to really have an understanding of where we stood at that point, what roads were safe to go through, where we could travel. So, you know, it's fascinating to see how communication has changed in such a short period of time. When we think about just the last 10 years. And I'm sure that for all of you, and you've been referring to it in bits and pieces as we've been talking, the internet, social media, creates challenges for every business, whether it's a municipality, a nonprofit, a commercial business. We all have to learn how to negotiate and manage what is appropriate, and how do we get the communication out that we want, and how do we manage it within each of our businesses. So someplace like the town of Plymouth, with so many moving parts and schools and so many pieces to your
municipality.
Thank you. I'm a television host. I can speak the language occasionally. that it must be challenging to be able to negotiate and manage all of those parts and pieces to, as you were saying, to ensure that the right communication is getting out.
I think sometimes you think that you are reaching every population, or you feel confident, and then you have that one resident that walks in and says, I never knew, well, I don't read the paper, and I don't go out to the website, and I don't have a cell phone, and I don't listen to the radio, and at some point you're like, wow, I actually don't know how to reach you unless I come to your home. So.
That happened to me a month and a half ago. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. It's like, oh my gosh, do we have to go to her house? Wow.
If you leave your address, I'll stop by if there's something important. You know? Now, so believe it or not, we're starting to get towards the end of this, the end of this show, and I want to hear from each of you. What do you think right now are some of either the most significant projects or maybe challenges that are facing your towns right now?
Well, we're going to get through this infrastructure improvement program of ours. Route 14 that goes through the center of town from Route 53 all the way to the Hanson line is currently under construction and will be for at least another year and a half. So that's a big issue that we have. And as I mentioned previously, the fact that we have some high-cost building projects, you know, for municipal buildings in town, that's something that we're really going to have to focus on between the announcement at this fall town meeting coming up that we're going to do this, and hopefully have a townwide referendum on these projects in the spring. So we'll be spending all winter educating the folks as to why we need these buildings and why we're putting them where we are, based on response times and things like that. So that seems to be our big thing for, through the rest of this fiscal year.
Okay, Bob.
We have 4 major department head openings right now. We have the Board of Assessors as the Assistant Assessor position, the Fire Chief's position, the Council on Aging Director, and the Finance Director. So that's a challenge, doing that all at once and trying to get it done within a reasonable amount of time with interviews and the whole process. So that's a big thing, and it gives me a chance to build my team, so to speak, with new people who can step up to those positions. And they may be within our grasp too, from within the town, but it's something that's going to take a lot of time over the next couple of months.
Well, I look forward to meeting them on Coffee and Conversation.
Yes. I'm due to do one of those.
Excellent. Rainey.
In Duxbury, we're in the midst of beginning our budget season. Our town meeting's in March, so we're a little earlier than a lot of the other communities. So our season starts now. For us, the 2 biggest challenges are going to be maintaining health insurance costs, because it's a big nut, and the other is figuring out how to do more with less. We're going the level funded route, just like Bob mentioned, and you try and figure out what to do in 2018 with the same dollar that you got in 2017. It's hard, because the cost of doing business is not getting cheaper; it's getting more expensive. So, maintaining the fiscal balance is the big trick.
And the fiscal health of your towns with less every year.
Correct.
Melissa.
We have a couple big issues that concern me. The first is the decommissioning of the power plant and both the anxiety it causes people in the community, the loss of revenue that we have to deal with from a fiscal perspective, and those secondary losses, which is some of the people that have worked there for so long leaving our community, houses for sale, and some of the small businesses around it that relied on it. So I think for us that's a big planning concern and one for the entire community. I think the second issue is the amount of growth in the town of Plymouth and the building department and the permits can almost be overwhelming. And what I mean by that is we're trying to balance our natural resources for the future. And when you look at the demand for water in this community and you see that sometimes in the summer we're barely making that demand, and the DEP is keeping a close eye on the town of Plymouth sitting on this gorgeous aquifer, and then you see all the building permits coming in for particularly South Plymouth, and the big development at Cordage, and what we know we have going on at 80 Makepeace, and the 1,500 acres that might become available to plant. All of that, I think, can be something you have to keep a close eye on.
So planning is going to be one of the biggest issues moving forward for the town right now.
Yes.
Now, in closing, I'd like to just go around the table one more time, and I'd like each of you to close just by saying, what is your greatest pleasure in doing your job every day?
Oh, you're so not starting on this side.
I'll give you a moment to think. So, 18 years, what is your greatest pleasure? What brings you back every day?
I've been in public sector my entire adult life, and so I'm kind of used to it, and we get a great pleasure out of helping Pembroke grow. And I think just the other night being at a ZBA meeting that I didn't have to be at, but I kind of took the bull by the horns on this one particular issue, and told fire and police and the plant and the ZBA and what have you that this is what we're going to do, and they said, great, thank you for stepping up to the plate and proposing what we think is a great alternative and things like that. So I think when using our education and experience in the business and doing something for the community that doesn't go, recognize. I think it's it's very satisfying. Very satisfying.
Thank you. Bob, quickly.
I think when I first took the position, I made a decision to immerse myself in the community of Kingston and to go to all the events, to take part in the Council on Aging events, the recreation, and that's been a great reciprocal thing with the residents who respect that I am part of the community and I enjoy being part of the community, and that's been a pleasure of mine.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Rainey.
For me, it's about 2 things. It's about the people, not just with whom I work, but the people that we serve. They both are tremendous. The employees we have, my coworkers, they're a remarkable group of people. And the people that we work for, the community at large, they're a lot of fun. There's some really, really nice people. And then secondarily, the place. Duxbury is a wonderful community, and it's because of the people in it. I live there. I've lived there now for 13 years. My kids are going to school there. It's just a wonderful community, and I just I feel grateful that I'm able to go there every single day. I still go there happily every morning. In spite of what may be happening around in the world, it's just a fun place to be. I really do like it.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Melissa?
I'm somewhat high energy, and I like a challenge, and Plymouth demands that of you. They demand that you be tough but fair, and that you get things accomplished, and that fits in really well for how I live and like to work. So I don't come into work one day in the town of Plymouth and feel almost every emotion, because this town is able to do that to you. So as long as I continue to feel that way, I will stay, and as long as they want me.
And I think all of your jobs bring something new every single day, so there must be a level of enjoying something new all of the time. And I find
We
that
had murder mysteries in Pembroke.
But I'd like to thank all of you for joining me today. This has been a pleasure to host this show today for Roundtable, and it really was wonderful to get to know each of you personally a little bit, as well as to hear more about how you interact with everyone. We hope to have you back, and I'm saying that on camera. We'd love to have you back and do this again. We would like to thank all of our viewers for watching this episode of Roundtable. Please tune in again. If you have questions, or if you want to see when the show is going to be on your government channel, please visit PACTV, pactv.org. If you have any questions and ideas for future episodes, you can also get in touch with our Government Access Coordinator, David Antoine, dave@pactv.org. So thank you again so much for joining us today for Roundtable. I'm your host, Donna Rodriguez.